So Luke chapter 19, we're just going to read the section starting in verse 11. While they were listening to these things, Jesus went on to tell a parable because he was near Jerusalem. They supposed the kingdom of God was going to appear immediately. So he said, a nobleman went to a distant country to receive a kingdom for himself and then return. And he called 10 of his slaves and gave them 10 minas and said to them, do business with this until I come back. But his citizens hated him and sent a delegation after him, saying, we do not want this man to reign over us. When he returned, after receiving the kingdom, he ordered that these slaves to whom he had given the money be called to him, so he might know what business they had done. The first appeared, saying, Master, your mina has made 10 minas more. And he said to him, well done, good slave, because you have been faithful in a very little thing, you are to be in authority over 10 cities. The second came, saying, your mina master has made 5 minas. And he said to him also, and you are to be over 5 cities. Another came, saying, Master, here is your mina which I kept put away in a handkerchief. For I was afraid of you, because you are an exacting man. You take up what you did not lay down and reap what you did not sow. He said to him, by your own words I will judge you, you worthless slave. Did you know that I am an exacting man, taking up what I did not lay down and reaping what I did not sow? Then why did you not put my money in the bank, and having come I would have collected it with interest? Then he said to the bystanders, take the mina away from him and give it to the one who has the 10 minas. And they said to him, Master, he has 10 minas already. And I tell you, to everyone who has, more shall be given, but with the one who does not have, even what he does have, will be taken away. But these enemies of mine who did not want me to reign over them, bring them here and slay them in my presence. So there's another parable in Matthew very similar to this. What is that parable? The talents, right? There's a lot of similarities we can draw from that. And there's a lot of differences as well. But we might hit that in a minute. But it's very reminiscent of that parable. So we're just going to kind of go through here a verse at a time and then make some observations. And of course, any comments are welcome. So verse 12, it says, a nobleman went to a distant country to receive a kingdom for himself and then return. Who does this nobleman represent? Christ. Right. Went to a far country to receive a kingdom. We're going to look at several references here. Jesus had been telling his disciples that he was going to go away. You know, it's something that he mentioned several times. Just turn over to John, the 7th chapter. This was not anything that they should not have been aware of. So John 7:33 says, therefore Jesus said, for a little while longer I am with you, then I go to him who sent me. You'll seek me and will not find me, and where I am you cannot come. And if we go over just a few more pages to John 13, also verse 33. Little children, I am with you a little while longer. You will seek me. And as I said to the Jews, now I also say to you, where I am going you cannot come. One page over, chapter 14, verse 28. You heard that I said to you, I go away, I will come, and I will come to you. If you love me, you would rejoice because I go to the Father, for the Father is greater than I. 16:5. These are just all the ones in John. 16:5 says, I'm going to him who sent me, and none of you asked me, where are you going? And then 16:28. I came forth from the Father, I have come into the world, I am leaving the world again and going to the Father. So again, he's been saying, I'm not going to be here. I'm going away. So this is just another way he's telling them, I'm going to a faraway country to receive a kingdom. And the big thing here is in return. You know, he's coming back. So looking at Matthew 26. Matthew 26:64. Jesus said, this is when he was before the Sanhedrin, Jesus said to him, you have said it yourself, nevertheless I tell you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven. That's repeated again in Mark 14:62. Acts 1:11 says, they also said, men of Galilee, why do you stand looking into the sky? This Jesus who has been taken up from you into heaven will come in just the same way you've watched him go up into heaven. And then over in Hebrews, these things that he's saying in the parable, they've heard a lot, and we'll hear again. Hebrews 9:28. So Christ, also having been offered once to bear the sins of many, will appear a second time for salvation without reference to sin to those who eagerly await him. So we know that he is going to return, and this is just him letting them, telling them again in a different way. I'm going to go away to a far country to receive a kingdom and return. So verse 13 says, he called 10 of his slaves, gave them 10 minas, and said to them, do business with this until I come back. What else might it say there instead of do business?
Help me make a profit.
Help me make a profit? Okay. This should turn into something besides what I gave you, right? I want to make a profit. When you're reading this parable, how it applies to not just the Christians this time, but us today. What is it we're supposed to be doing business with? What is it that he's given us, and how are we doing business?
Paul tells us in Ephesians, the first chapter, that he's given us every spiritual blessing that can never be hoped for or found or realized.
Okay.
We're supposed to take those spiritual blessings that he's given us and do something with them.
So
that applies to everything from personal matters to the commission.
right.
Teach the nation, teach the world.
Right. So Mark says that we've been given every spiritual blessing, and we're supposed to do work with those, right? Whether it be just the basic stuff or the Great Commission, going to all the world and speaking the gospel, and that's exactly right. So in this, when you look at this, how this applies to us, we've been given, God has given us all, a talent, if you want to call it that, right? However it is that whatever job we have to do as Christians, we have to do that job. It's our job to lead people to Christ. And we want to make a profit. We can't just, by profiting, we want to bring other souls with us, right? That's the whole idea, is we want to lead as many people to Christ as we can. Verse 14 says, his citizens hated him and sent a delegation after him, saying, we do not want this man to reign over us. Again, some other references in the New Testament here, going over to John chapter 7. John chapter 7, verse 7 says, the world cannot hate you, but it hates me because I testify of it, that its deeds are evil. We're told that the world, the world will not necessarily love us, that we will be despised, and we should count it as a blessing if we are. 15:25, John 15:25 says, they have done this to fulfill the word that is written in their law. They hated me without a cause. And that's a reference to Psalm 69, which I want to turn over there real quick. I just like the way this verse reads. Psalm 69:4. It says, those who hate me without cause are more than the hairs of my head. Those who would destroy me are powerful, being wrongfully my enemies. What I did not steal, I then have to restore. What a powerful verse. Those who hate me without a cause are more than the hairs of my head. That's a lot of people for most people, right? Those who would destroy me are powerful, being wrongfully my enemies. In other words, they had no reason to be his enemies. They're wrongfully my enemies. So that's where that verse comes from. And then it says that they don't want him to reign over us. So I'm just going to stay in John real quick and go over to chapter 1. Chapter 1, verse 11, talking about Jesus just in the beginning, the Word and everything. Verse 11 says, he came to his own, and those who were his own did not receive him. They did not want him. And then John 5:43. John 5:43, I have come in my Father's name, you do not receive me. If another comes in his own name, you will receive him. So we've got these people that, again, this is a parable, but obviously it's got application right then, and then they'll see more of it later. But the citizens hated him. They don't want him to rule over us. Verse 15 says, when he returned, after receiving the kingdom. So I think the important thing here, after having received the kingdom. So what a premillennialists think is going to happen as far as the kingdom goes.
Well, it's not established yet.
It's not yet established, and that nothing's been received, and that he won't receive the kingdom until he comes back, right? So this kind of blows that out of the water. Having received the kingdom, past tense. He called his servants to them to see how they'd done. When you look at verse 15, he called them to him so he might know what business they had done. What might this be an illustration of? Judgment Day? Right. That's definitely what I think as well. The first one appeared, verse 16, the first one appeared saying, Master, your mina has made 10 minas more. So the first thing that I thought about this verse, it says, your mina has made 10. So he knows whose mina this is, whose money this is, whose profit this is. This was never the slave's profit. This was his money that he put to work, and now it's his again, right? That's the whole idea of the ownership piece. But that's a 1,000% rate of return. Turning 1 into 10. That's pretty phenomenal. But the master, we got to remember that we cannot do anything unless we use what God has provided us. We have nothing to start with. Everything we have came from God. So everything that we do is for Him, and it returns to Him. That's the whole idea of that. We talked, I think Zane brought up with the rich young ruler, how some people get self-assured, that, oh, I did this. These are my riches. Me. And we have to remember that we don't have anything without God. Everything we have comes from God, and it's to be used for His glory. So we have to remember that, because it's very easy to become self-assured about, look what I did, when in fact we could do nothing without Him. When you read verses 17, let's just keep verse 17 through 19. He said to him, well done, good slave, because you have been faithful in very little thing. You are to be an authority over 10 cities. Again, the second one came very similar. Your mina made 5, and you'll be over 5 cities. So, you think of well done. Anytime you see well done, you have to think about well done, good and faithful servant. But there's a couple other verses I think that are worth looking at. If we look at Matthew 16, verse 27, the Son of Man is going to come in the glory of His Father with His angels, and then will repay every man according to his deeds. That's really what's happening here, right? This guy, these 2 men did what they were told to do to make a profit, and they're being rewarded accordingly, right? 10 cities, 5 cities, whatever that looks like. And so they were repaid according to their deeds. Turning over to 1 Corinthians chapter 3. Chapter 3, verse 8. Well, let's start with verse 7. So then neither the one who plants nor the one who waters is anything, but God causes the growth. Now he who plants and he who waters are one, but each will receive his own reward according to his own labor. So we have to work, and we will receive our reward or lack thereof, depending on what we have done or have not done. And then just going over to 2 Corinthians chapter 9. Eventually. Chapter 9, verse 6. I say, he who sows sparingly will also reap sparingly. He who sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. We have examples of that in this parable. This guy's given the slave 10 cities to rule over, another one 5 cities to rule over, because they did what they were told to do. They got a profit. They increased. They did business while he was gone. Verse 20 is really where it really starts hitting home. So another one came and said, Master, here's your mina, which I kept put away in a handkerchief. Of all the things to do, even if he had buried it in the ground, it'd probably been a lot safer than just sticking it in a handkerchief, right? I always thought that was just weird. It's very, very careless, very, the word lazy comes to mind. But there was nothing gained. He was unfruitful. That nothing happened with what he was given. Let's look again. I told you, lots of verses today. Matthew chapter 3. There's so much about this parable that that draws you to other verses, which is the whole point. Verse 10 of chapter 3 says, the axe is already laid at the root of the trees. Therefore, every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. We have to bear fruit. Matthew 13. And this is, I'm going to read this is him explaining the parable of the sower. 13, starting in verse 18. He says, then hear the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what has been sown in his heart. This is the one on whom seed was sown beside the road. The one on whom seed was sown on the rocky places, this is the man who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy, yet he has no firm root in himself, is only temporary, and when affliction or persecution arises because of the word, immediately he falls away. And the one on whom seed was sown among the thorns, this is the man who hears the word, and the worry of the world and the deceitfulness of wealth choke the word, and it becomes unfruitful. And the one on whom seed was sown on the good soil, this is the man who hears the word, understands it, who indeed bears fruit, brings forth some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. So, your first two slaves in this parable are very much like verse 23 here. They heard what they knew what they were told to do. They went out and did it, and reaped and bore fruit. But then verse 22, the world, deceitfulness of wealth, choke the word, it becomes unfruitful. The point is, we cannot afford to be idle. We cannot afford to be unfruitful. We know what we're supposed to do, and we have to do it. Yes, sir.
If you look at the parable of the talents, it's interesting that you brought up the L word, lazy.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly how the one talent guy is characterized. You wicked and lazy servant.
Right.
And the point's to be made that as James tells us in James 2, beginning with verse 14, our faith has to do something.
Yes.
Not doing something is not optional. We have to have a working faith, and so instead of wicked stands in contrast to good, lazy stands in contrast to faithful.
Right.
Matthew 25.
Right.
So the lazy word is very appropriate. We have a tendency to get lazy.
We do, and basically Mark was saying that faith requires work. We have to put our faith to work, which is absolutely a fact. I mean, we see examples of that. He referenced James. But, lazy is such a dangerous word, and it's something that's very easy for us to fall into. And, you think of lazy, and you might have something pictured of someone sitting around watching TV, but lazy can be a lot of different things. And to me, the whole idea is if we know we're supposed to do something, and we just choose not to do it, number one, that's sinful. We'll get that in a minute. But number two, it's lazy. And we've talked about this before. It doesn't necessarily, it might not even be that hard to do. Sometimes it's a very little impact. A very little thing causes a huge impact. The whole ripple effect, that's a thing. So just taking a little action every day can add up. You never know who you're influencing, good or bad, unfortunately. So we've always got to be willing to do the work. Looking at John 15:2, again, on the same thing. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. Every branch that bears fruit, he prunes it so that it can bear more fruit. So we've got to be fruitful. I'm going to go to Titus. Titus chapter 3, verse 14. Our people must also learn to engage in good deeds, to meet pressing needs, so that they will not be unfruitful. We just cannot be unfruitful. Mark was just talking about in the parable of talents how the wicked servant that was classified as lazy. Lazy, slothful, however you want to put that. There's a lot of things to look at there. Proverbs 18:9. Proverbs has so many things about lazy, but there's a 18:9 is a really good one. It says, he also who is slack in his work is brother to him who destroys. So he's basically saying if you're doing nothing, you're the same as someone who's actively destroying things, which is accurate. Inaction sometimes is more devastating than action. Ecclesiastes 10:18. Through indolence, the rafter sags, or through laziness, the rafters sag, and through slackness, the house leaks. So we just can't we have to be active, is what I'm trying to get at. And then last verse, James 4:17 says, "Therefore, to the one who knows the right thing to do and does not do it, to him it is sin." That's what I was talking about earlier. If we know what we're supposed to do and we're not doing it, it's not just laziness, it's sin. Yes, sir.
A lot of times we get caught up thinking that I can't do enough. You look at the one-time man, and this particular parable, or what a point is used, he turned his skin.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way I can do that. He did turn 1 into 5. What do you think would have happened if this lazy servant, he just turned 1 into 2?
Yeah.
God's not calling everybody to be called.
Right.
He gives us all our talents, and we're to use them. And I think the thing is, at least one conclusion that I draw from this, is had that lazy servant just taken that money and tried to do even the only thing to, so I'm sorry, I made it this good. I think he would have heard the words, the same words that the 10 and the 5 talent or money man had heard.
Yeah. So Zane said, at the very least, he feels like if the guy with 1 mina had turned it into even 2, that he would have been looked at the same as the 5 and the 10 talent, the 10 mina, because the whole idea is action and doing what you can do with what you've got, right? But he chose to do nothing. Like even he hid it, didn't want to do anything with it, right? So everyone does not have the same talent. Where Zane might be able to reach 10 people in one day, and I might see 10 people in 1 week. I mean, you don't know, but we all have to do something. Yes, sir.
And we lose sight, back to Zane's point and your point, and you've already mentioned 1 Corinthians 3:7. Sometimes we'll pass away this laziness as, well, I can't accomplish much.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Paul tells us 1 Corinthians 3:7, it's not about us. God gives the increase, not us.
Right.
And we'll forget our faith is in ourselves.
Yeah.
It's not in him. He's the one that's doing the work through us. But we'll say, nah, I can't get that done.
Right.
I'm not going to do anything. Well, we're losing sight of 1 Corinthians 3:7. He gives the increase, not me.
Right. Right. And so some people are scared to even get started. That's what y'all are saying. And that's right. There's so many people that it's like, well, there's all these things are against me. And what if I say something and I offend these people and they look at me differently? Or what if I say it and they get mad because I tell them that what they're doing is wrong? It is what it is. I hate to use that term, but it is. We've got to do what we've got to do. Our job is to do the things that we know to do. And again, it could just be a small action. First of all, I think you start by the way you live your life. That's the first thing you can do without ever having to say anything to anybody. But that also sets up a great foundation when these conversations start to happen. Yes.
I kind of mentioned earlier, not all of us are Paul, but if you look at Hebrews 11, quote what Paul would say, there's a guy in there that, gives a little bias for, but Abel was there.
Mm-hmm.
And Abel was there not because he did some great work. He didn't lead a nation across, the desert, free him from Egypt, but he was there because he just offered a sacrifice that was pleasing to God. That's what he's told to do, and he did it.
Right. Right.
So that could be us.
Yeah. That's right. And Zane was saying sometimes it's just doing what we're told to do. And in this case, for us today, the sacrifices we make for God are not the same as they did in the Bible days. But it might be, you might sacrifice popularity. You might sacrifice certain friendships, certain activities that people are like, well, why would they not get involved in X, Y, or Z? We make different kinds of sacrifices today, and we have to just do what we know to do. And that's what he was saying. Abel, he didn't have like this great, huge feat like crossing the Red Sea or anything like that, but he did what God told him to do, and he is listed among the Hall of Faith. So yeah, that's good. One thing I wonder about verse 20, when this guy, here's your mina, here's your 1 mina. I don't know if he was around and heard the other 2, but I kind of wondered, does he think, well, hey, at least I get 1 city, right? Because he has 1 mina, and then of course he gets like some rude awakening. He gets nothing. But that's what I mean. Sometimes we want to get something for nothing, and that's there are some other denominations and things like that will basically say, once you have asked Jesus into your heart, your work's done. You're good. Once you've been saved, then you're good. You don't have to do anything else, because once you've made that choice, you're golden. So one thing that Mark was mentioning, one thing I put down here. Well, hang on. Let's go to verse 21 real fast. Verse 21 says, "I was afraid of you because you're an exacting man. You take up what you did not lay down and reap what you did not sow." What's the servant saying here?
I was scared if I failed.
Okay.
What would happen?
I was scared of you, right? But is he also saying that this guy is maybe an unjust business person, accusing him of doing things he shouldn't do? He reaps what he did not sow. You don't think so? So I had several different commentaries that looked at it.
You can accomplish things in the business world that most people aren't capable of doing.
Right.
Now,
Right.
Obviously, since the parallels can be made with the Savior in regards to the nobleman,
Mm-hmm.
crooked business dealings is not,
Right. Right.
not a possibility.
Sure. Exactly. What he was saying is that the crooked bit, when you're talking about Jesus as being the nobleman, the crooked business activity is not a possibility because of who we're talking about. And that's absolutely right. It's if you guys, when you're studying, I would encourage you. It's good to read lots of different commentaries, because it's so interesting how one verse can mean something so different. I mean, seriously, just one verse to different people, and it makes you understand. This is why we have 150 denominations, because you have this one verse that's pretty simple to understand, and they've made it something totally different. Yes, sir.
For those of us in the business world or around the business world, we've all seen that person that everything they touch,
Yeah.
literally everything they touch,
Yep.
becomes a profit.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what he's saying about it. You're extremely successful.
Right.
And I was afraid that if I was not successful, that I'm comparing myself to you.
Right.
But I see that all the time.
Right.
I'm not that guy.
Yeah.
But I see people all the time that they'll purchase this real estate and move it in a short period of time, and it just outrageously profits.
Right.
And that's what he's talking about.
Right. And he's kind of saying, I knew I couldn't do what you could do, so I didn't want to get started. Right. So I look at this in a different way too. Do you really feel like the servant was afraid? What does his actions tell you? I mean, to me, if I was, he was scared to the point of inaction. That's kind of what he says in verse 22. Like he's like, by your own words, I'm going to judge you, right? You knew I was these things, and yet you still didn't do anything. At least you could have put it in the bank and made interest, right? At the very least, you could have at least put the money in the bank, and I would have gotten interest off of it, right? But instead, he was scared to the point of inaction. Yes, sir.
This is just one example. I've seen that over and over again in the kingdom and local congregations, where somebody's asked to do something publicly
Mm-hmm.
and be pretty simple, like it.
Yeah.
And it's a fear of failure. It's a fear of failure in front of people.
Yeah.
And that's just one tiny example, but it happens.
Yeah.
I can't do that. I might fail. I can't talk to that person privately because it may not turn out the way that I want it to.
Yep.
I can't not do so-and-so because I'm going to be with the people that will influence me the other direction, and I'll stand out. I'll stick out like a sore thumb. So I'm just going to kind of go along with the crowd. We see that all the time in the kingdom.
Yes. And what Mark's saying is that this what's happening here is not an uncommon thing to see, even in the local church. Someone's asked to do something very small, and they just don't do it for fear of failure, for, I'm uncomfortable, I don't like to speak publicly. I have a list here of other people. Basically what I put here is excuses don't work. And can you think of other times in the text where excuses were used to justify not doing work? And I have a list of things. Think about Moses. I'm not an eloquent speaker. I'm just this. I'm just that. Jeremiah. I'm too young. There's so many times that people want to use excuses. The point is, we have to do it. If you're uncomfortable, that's okay. The more you do it, the more comfortable you'll be. You just got to start somewhere. Saying a prayer, teaching a class, working the table, whatever it is that you're asked to do. We all, as Christians, we all have work to do. That sometimes that's in the building. More times than not, it's outside of the building. Mark talked this morning. We're only here 4 hours a week. The work we have to do is not what we do here for 4 hours a week. It's sure not the 4-minute prayer you have or the 14-second prayer you have. The majority of our work is outside of these walls, and that's what it's designed to be. But we have to get started. We have to get started. I think about Gideon also. God told him he would defeat the Midianites, but he still had excuses as to why this wouldn't work. There's all sorts of excuses that you see in the Bible. Just real quick, I know we talked about this recently, but Luke 14, when we're talking about the parable of the great dinner, the man was giving the big dinner, and he invited these people to come in. Starting in verse 18, they all began to make excuses. The first one said to him, "I've bought a piece of land. I need to go out and look at it." Another one said, "I bought 5 yoke of oxen. I'm going to try them out, so excuse me." Another one said, "I've married a wife, and for that reason I can't come." There's all these excuses as to why they can't do what they need to do. You know, we got to make sure we're not making excuses and just, well, that's just how I am. I can't do these things. That's just how God made me, or whatever excuse you use. We all can do something. You know, we talk about it all the time. Maybe you won't ever be a preacher, and that's okay. But there are other things you can do here. You know, so get involved. If you're uncomfortable being involved, get with somebody and let's find a way to get you involved because we all have work to do. Verses 22 and 23. In your own words, I will judge you. You worthless slave. I'm an exacting man, taking up what I did not lay down, reaping what I did not sow. Why did you not put my money in the bank? And having come, I would have collected with interest. I've heard Todd say before, like the very simplest thing we can do is come to the building, is come to church, and that's kind of what I'm thinking about here. Like, at the very least, as opposed to putting it in a handkerchief, he knew he could get interest off of it. That's how money worked even back then. Why not at least go do that? The very minimum action to do something, and he still chose to do nothing. I got John 8:9 written down here. Okay, so this is talking about Jesus and the adulterous woman. But 8:9 says he's talking about who's without the first stone, and it said when they heard it, they began to go out one by one, beginning with the older ones, and he was left alone with the woman. In other words, this is, I put this down as self-conviction. This guy's own words is what convicted him. He said, "I'm going to use your own words to judge you." It's the same situation here. These guys were ready to stone this person, and he said, who's about the first sin, cast the first stone. That they're convicted of self-conviction. He didn't convict them and say, "You're all a bunch of sinners." He just said, "Hey, whoever didn't have first sin, didn't have sin, throw the first stone." So, this guy, the point is, the guy knew what he was supposed to do, and he just didn't do it. He just chose not to do it. Verse 24 through 26, real fast, they said, "Take his mind and give it to the one that has 10." And in verse 25, it's almost like they said, "Master, he already has 10." It's almost like, "Are you sure? Are you sure you want me to do this? I mean, these guys, he already has 10. But there's a lot of verses, about this as well. Matthew 13:12. The one who has the least, more will be added to him, and things like that. Let's see, 13:12. Whoever has, to him more shall be given. He will have an abundance, but whoever does not have, even what he has shall be taken away from him. So this is nothing that they haven't heard before. And then, of course, in Luke, essentially, Luke 8:18, about the lamp. Don't hide your lamp. Don't hide your talent. Don't not put your mana to work. Real quick, any questions?
That 24-25 section clarifies who was present, those and they.
Right.
Everybody's present when he makes an account or takes an account of what was done or not done.
Right.
So it's not a solo one-on-one meeting.
Right.
Everybody knows.
Everybody heard. Yep. Thanks, guys.